Okay, this is a reaction video. This is from The World According to Briggs. He's done a couple of videos, the 10 whitest states in the United States and the 10 blackest states in the United States. And I don't know that I really pay much attention to race or a whole lot, even though some people really do. But I was kind of curious about these, see which of these states are. Uh, I'm I'm comfortable around all races. In fact, where I work, I have all races working with me, so it's not a big deal to me. But I'm kind of curious about this one. So let's see the 10 whitest states in the United States.
A few months ago, I finally caved to public pressure. Normally, I avoid race-related videos on this
Yeah, and I normally do as well.
channel, but I kept getting requests. I always avoided the subject because I just didn't want the comment section to be ablaze with racist comments. People pointed out that it's not just racists that want to know the demographics of a location. People of different races like to know where to live so they can be near types of restaurants they like, stores, and different festivals, things like that. To me, that
I guess that kind of makes some sense.
argument made sense, so a few months back we did a video on the most Asian states in the US, and then later on we did the most Hispanic states. Today we are doing the whitest states. I mean, it's kind of only fair.
Yeah, I haven't seen the Hispanic and the Asian ones, but I might do those as well.
We're going to look at the percentage of the population that is considered white. We'll also look at what European people settled in that area first, and this is all according to the US Census. And now, a brief overview. Around 1565, the Spanish showed up in St. Augustine, Florida. Then, of course, the Mayflower showed up on November 11th, 1620. Now, there's a whole bunch of other stories with explorers and Russians in Alaska and all that other good stuff, but the two main things in the history book of North American colonization is the Mayflower and then the Spanish down in St. Augustine.
And there's also the Vikings and the before that, but we can go do history things on other videos.
Whatever the case may be or the story may be, white people took over, and what is now the United States has been predominantly white ever since. Today we're going to look at 10 states whose percentages haven't changed much since
I wonder if they're all on the East Coast. I'm kind of curious about that.
the 1700s. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 10, Nebraska.
Or maybe they're in the middle of the country. That's also a possibility too.
Nebraska is extremely white, and they
Was there last year actually?
start our list off. By the 1870s, Nebraska's European immigrant population was at its peak, and about 25% of the state's residents were born in a foreign country. Danes, Swedes, Irish, Germans, and Czechs figured predominantly among the early newcomers to Nebraska. If you need more proof that Nebraska is extremely white, take this into consideration. The number one male name in Nebraska is Oliver, followed by Henry and Liam. Number 4 is Theodore. 88.1% of Nebraska's population is white.
Oh, that's. I'm kind of now questioning why I'm doing this video because I really don't care how many white, black, pink, purple polka dot. It makes no difference to me. But okay.
Number 9, Montana.
You know, we're in the middle of the country. We're probably going to go up and down the Dakotas and Wyoming as well, because Wyoming doesn't have a whole lot of people there. So
Coming in strong with the blonde hair, blue eyes crowd, you have Montana. Originally, Italians and Germans settled in Fergus and Park counties.
and this is really more a historical overview of why you have more white people. Again, a lot of the black population, the Asian in San Francisco, and New York City, Chicago, Baltimore. I wonder if those states are predominantly uh, uh, black than as opposed to white.
Many Germans came from North Dakota and Canada, and a lot of cattlemen that landed in Montana were mostly English and Scottish. Now, the dynamic back then was the English and the Scottish basically worked the cattle, but the owners were typically German. Now, they did have sheepmen. Sheepmen normally weren't okay back in the day. The cattle guys didn't really like them. But there were a lot of them in Montana, and they were from the British Isles. That's how Montana became the Montana we know today. 88.9% of Montana's population is white.
And I was in Montana last year as well, and there's not a whole lot of population centers in Montana.
Number 8, Utah. If you didn't
again, I'm picking. He's about to say we're picking up on where we are in the country. Yeah, I'm picking up on it.
No, Utah was mostly white. You've never been in a Mormon temple. Mormons make up about 70% of the
Yeah, that is true.
Utah population, and they have a history of being so white they think Malcolm X is a member of the X-Men. In the early days, Spanish explorers and French Canadian, British, and Canadian fur traders had briefly stomped around Utah before 1847. But it was that year that the Mormon immigrants from Britain, Canada, Denmark, and Norway were part of the Mormon exodus from Illinois, and became the first non-Native Americans to settle in the future Beehive State. 90.6% of Utah's population is considered.
And again, where we are in the United States is really in that central part of the West. We're across the Mississippi River and Nebraska, and just north of Nebraska is South Dakota. But uh, uh, if you go through Wyoming, you go to Montana. Yeah, we're in that area because Utah's not too far from Nebraska, and I wonder if we're going to have North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming. We've already had Montana. We've already had Nebraska. I wonder if Oklahoma is going to be play a part in this. I don't know.
White. Number 7, Iowa. If you didn't know Iowa's very white, you've never been to a county fair in Iowa. Before I started doing the research for this video, I honestly thought it was going to be number 1. I've been to Iowa a few times, and it is probably the whitest state I've ever seen. At least that was my opinion. The numbers don't match up with my opinion. So here they are at number 7. Back in the early days, like the 1840s, a majority of the settlers that came to Iowa came from the Scandinavian countries. Some were Dutch, German, Irish, Scots, and Welsh. New Englanders started showing up that same time, along with Quakers in 1941, and then the Mormons started showing up around 1846. Yes, Iowa has a good-sized population of Mormons as well. Nothing near what Utah has, but it's up there. These days, 90.6% of Iowa's...
I'm wondering how much it also has to do with, from a historical standpoint, because most of the slaves were in the South, but they were east of the Mississippi River. And I'm kind of curious to see how much that plays into it as well. Because Iowa, West, all these are Western state, or west of the Mississippi River, and they would not have had a lot of slaves brought in there. And if you had a lot of slaves like you had in the South, like in Alabama, like in Mississippi, places like that, South Carolina, where once they were freed, a lot of them settled there, and that's why you have uh, a lot of blacks in the South. I'm wondering if not a lot of them moved to the West. Okay, and that's why these states are like they are. Okay, like I said, I never really paid much attention, and I may be speaking out of the wrong side of my, wrong orifice. But I'm just curious about this because these states are extremely white. Not that it makes a damn bit of difference, but it is interesting how this all panned out because the slaves weren't brought over here by on the slave trade. They weren't brought over here by choice. Okay, and when they were freed, by the time the slaves were freed, they had no uh, what's the word I'm looking for? No, there was nothing to but. It's not like you could send them all back to Africa or something like that, or wherever they came from. They had already they'd grown up in the United States, and so I'm kind of curious to see how much. Well, maybe I should do a deep dive on that on some other video. Maybe somebody else can give me some information on that.
population is considered white. Number 6, Wyoming. There were
Yeah, I
six.
knew Wyoming would be on here, but we're in the same part of the country. And again, like I said, from a historical standpoint, I was just talking about the slaves and the South and in the East and everything like that. Um, yeah.
groups that made up the early immigrant settlers of Wyoming. The British, the Germans, Italians, Basque, and the Greeks showed up here. In 1870, immigrants from the British Isles represented about 1/5 of Wyoming's territorial population and over 1/2 the foreign-born population. So the Brits came in strong. In the last few decades, Wyoming's become very popular with just about everyone. But these days, 92.5% of their population are identified as white.
I think that I was in Wyoming for the first time last year, and it's not a very um, populous state. There's not a lot of population there. I mean, we drove from Denver into Wyoming and up to Gillette, and uh, we saw Devil's Tower, stuff, but there wasn't a whole lot of uh, what's the word I'm looking for? I didn't see a whole lot of people there. So
Number 5, Idaho. Idaho has quite the reputation for being very white. It has always been that way. In the late 19th and early 20th century, a large majority of the settlers
I've never been to Idaho before, but this doesn't surprise me either.
were English, many before statehood. This seemed like a really great place to them because there wasn't much government. Back in those days, most of the English from jolly old England were being taxed to death, and a place with next to no government seemed like a great place to live. 93% of Idaho's population is identified as white. Number 4, New Hampshire. This is an
Okay, this is actually the first time we've actually gone to the gone east of the Mississippi River. Uh, we're in the Northeast, and it's actually kind of surprises me because we're not too far from uh, Boston, and we're not too far from New York City for that matter. And I was again, maybe we can find a little bit more about this.
another state that should be no surprise to anyone that's ever been to New Hampshire. If you live there, you already know. I mean, we're talking about a state where the people consider Taco Bell diversity. New Hampshire being part of New England.
And again, I should probably should say it's not just you know African American, Asian American, Hispanic American, all different races. When we were out west, I would have wondered, what I mean is would you done Hispanic? Is Hispanic considered white? I mean, I have some Hispanic in me, and but I'm mostly European. I'm This has gotten me more curious than I thought it would.
Obviously goes back to the colonial days. And at the time, it was mostly British residents in the area that would eventually become New Hampshire. But in 1799, they started being joined there by
Was there an Old Hampshire?
a lot of Scottish and Irish immigrants. What's strange is for a long time, they had a lot of French Canadians living in New Hampshire, and sometimes you could find little bits and pieces of that culture in New Hampshire. They came down for the textile mills from Quebec, and a lot of them stayed back in the day. These days, 93.1% of New Hampshire's population is considered white. Number 3, West Virginia.
Now that's actually a surprise there. Okay, I would have thought there would have been more blacks in West Virginia, more. I thought that would be more diverse.
West Virginia is kind of strange. I thought they would be a little bit higher as in the percentage because unlike most cities in the United States, West Virginia cities really don't have a lot of diversity. And if you look outside the cities,
Yeah, that's something I didn't know because when I was last time I was in West Virginia, I saw quite a few different races milling around. I was in Charleston, and that actually kind of surprises me. I saw, well, and maybe, and I was also, well, maybe I was again. I don't know. This has gotten me more perplexed than anything else. This is a very interesting video. I'm liking this more than I thought I would.
in some of the rural areas, the mountains and the hollers especially, there is like zero diversity. So I'm actually a little surprised they're number 3 on this list. The settlement of present
No, he's surprised that I guess I saw more diversity out there than okay.
day West Virginia began in the mid-1700s when Scottish, Irish, and German settlers from Pennsylvania came to the area that is now Berkeley and Greenbrier counties. The Scottish and Irish cultures really soaked into the West Virginia land. A lot of the folk music in this part of the country is heavy with Scottish and Irish folk influence.
And a lot of this is historical too. I mean, I do enjoy history. I know a lot about my history, but I'm finding out I don't know as much as I thought I did, at least as far about racial history. Maybe I need to do a lital bit more.
These days, 93.5% of West Virginia's population is identified as white. Number 2, Vermont. Remember everything I said about New Hampshire? Well, it's the same in Vermont.
I thought we would be out in the Dakotas by now. Okay, I thought we'd be staying in that part because 10, Nebraska, Montana, Utah, Idaho, Iowa. Those are all in that place out there in the west of the Mississippi. But the past couple, we've gone to New Hampshire, we've gone to West Virginia. Now we're going up here to let's take a look here.
Vermont. It always seems to be that way. I mean, they're right next to each other, and they always seem to show up.
Now, my girlfriend loves Vermont. I've never been to Vermont, but she thought it was one of the best states she's ever been in.
Really close on lists. You look at their crime stats, you look at their school grades, their economies, they're always right next to each other on whatever stat we're looking at. Like New Hampshire, the place was settled with the English, the Irish, and the Scottish eventually, and they also had a fair share of people coming down from Quebec, the French Canadians. These days, 94.2% of Vermont's population is identified as white. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget we have another channel called On This Day. There's a link down below. There's also a link for Home and Money, which if you're moving to another state, another city, they're a great website to help you get in touch with a realtor in that area you're moving to. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, Maine. Look at that. New England has 3 states in the top 4 on this list. And if you've ever been to New England, you probably are not surprised at all.
Well, I mean, I'm a little bit surprised, not in terms of that these states are, maybe the fact that these states are as high as they are, or a higher percentage. I thought it would have been out west in that area. I thought we would have gotten the Dakotas there. I thought we would have gotten maybe Oklahoma or Kansas there as well. Maybe I'm wrong, but again, I guess I don't know my racial history. And again, it doesn't bother me where you want to live or what race you are, but that is fascinating to me, and I'm liking this video. I found this more fascinating than I thought I would.
And especially when it comes to Maine. If you look at Maine's largest city, which is Portland, first of all, they have less than 70,000 residents. The entire metro area has about 556,000.
And Maine is kind of spread out, but so is a lot of those places out in the west.
But if you look at the city of Portland, Maine, their white population is 91.27%. That is very high for a city. Granted, this isn't some urban sprawl or anything like that. It's still a city. If you take a look at the other Portland across the country in Oregon, their white population is about 76%. Side note, Oregon almost made this list. It comes in like number 14. Portland, Oregon's obviously a lot bigger, but still, it's an interesting comparison. The Pine Tree State has a population that is 94.4% white.
Wow, that's amazing. Like I said, I find this more fascinating than anything else. I didn't think I'd find this as very fascinating, but I'm really enjoying this video. This is I'm going to have to do the other one on the states that have more blacks.
All right, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. If we do another one of these, what race, culture, religion should we do it about? All right, everyone.
Yeah, please click like, share, and subscribe for The World According to Briggs, and please click like, share, and subscribe for me as well. This was actually kind of fascinating, more fascinating than I thought I was gonna find it. So, thanks for watching. Have a good rest of your day, and